Okay, welcome to the All Things Endurance podcast presented by UESCA. I'm your host, Rick Prince. And today for our guest, we have Mandy Mullen, and she is the race director for the run.Windsor race series. So welcome, Mandy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So Mandy and I have known each other for a while now. We've collaborated on different projects for UESCA. The latest project that we're collaborating on is a running race director specialization course. So that will be launching soon. So I'm excited for that to come out. So Mandy, before we get started with some of the questions about race directing and running race directing specifically, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about your background, whether it be education, work, the stuff you've been doing with run.Windsor.
Yeah, so my background, I'm a Colorado native, and I didn't venture too far from the nest from northeastern Colorado. I went to school at Colorado State University. I got a degree in marketing, and I worked in student housing through college. I progressed on to sell new homes in the great year of 2007. I'm going to go ahead and say that picking careers and timing hasn't always been my forte. Right after I started selling new homes, the market crashed and I landed back in student housing. I then went on to interior design, which is a little bit of a curveball. So I worked in custom home remodeling, interior design for a couple of years. And then I was a stay-at-home mom, and there's a fun, interesting story, which I'm sure I've told you, Rick, before, that landed me into the endurance world. But a turn of events that really pushed me to want to embrace running and become a great runner. And so then I started run.Windsor. So that's a little teaser, I guess. I don't know if you want me to get part of that. So I started run.Windsor in 2017. I graduated college in 2007. And so I've had the run.Windsor race series and run.Windsor running group since 2017. In that time, I also owned a gym, a brick and mortar gym in 2020. Again, not good timing. And then now I'm just really involved in my community on top of owning run.Windsor. I'm currently serving as the interim executive director of the Windsor Area Chamber of Commerce as well.
So not busy at all.
No, not busy at all.
A lot of free time, I'm sure.
I'm working on learning the word no. I don't know it very well, but I'm enhancing that skill. So
it's a tricky one.
It is. For personalities like mine, it tends to be.
So a question for you then, I guess, is getting into running, changing careers. What landed you in race directing? Like, what got you into that? And what was the first race that you put on?
Yeah. So when my husband and I got engaged in 2009, we decided to start running as a means to health. We spent a lot of time eating a lot of pizza and not working out a lot in college, and wanted health to be a part of our marriage and our family, and just said, hey, this is a check-in. Let's join a gym. Let's start running a little bit. And I did not enjoy running. So, this is me at 23, 24, whatever that age was, just hated running. A mile was torture. My husband caught on faster than I did. And I thought, well, if he's going to love running and I want to have hobbies with him, I'm going to have to enjoy running too. And so we, jumped into 5Ks, 10Ks, dabbled in half marathons, and fast forward to the year that I'm pregnant with our now oldest. So this would have been in 2011, 2012. It would have been 2012. My husband qualified for the Boston Marathon. And I don't think I hadn't even run a full marathon yet. I had just done halves, and still very reluctant, not embracing the community, not feeling like a real runner. So he qualified for Boston, and we went to Boston in 2013, which, if I've got runners listening, you guys all know what happened in 2013. It was the year of the finish line bombings, and we were there, and luckily, we were all safe, and Nick had crossed the finish line before the bombs had gone off, about 30, 45 minutes. So we were at the subway, we heard the commotion, we saw some people that had kind of fled that scene knowing what had gone on. But it really inspired me, Rick. Like, it really inspired me just watching the running community come together after those events, and, the aftermath of it, but also reflecting back on how much work had gone into qualifying to get there, and seeing just his journey and knowing that there are thousands others out there that have their own journey and their own reason why that they believe so much in running. And so I'll never forget, being on the airplane when we left Boston, and it was right, they had TVs on the chair backs, and we watched them find the second brother hiding in the boat. And it was like this grand finale of this big event. And Nick said, when I get home, I'm going to find another race. I'm going to qualify so we can come back next year. And I didn't say it out loud, but I definitely said it in my mind and thought, someday I'm going to get us here too. I want to go home. I'm going to become a good runner. I'm going to run marathons. And one day I'll get us back to Boston. And so when we got back to Colorado, I just dove more into my fitness. I just started taking better care of myself. I started, going to the gym and group fitness, and started running more. But I didn't really work in the industry. I did kind of start to set goals on how I'd get to Boston, and also became in love with fitness and decided I wanted to become a group fitness instructor. And at the time we lived in Fort Collins, which had a pretty prominent running community. We moved over to Windsor in 2017, or late 2016. And I just saw it as a fresh start. And it was really a small community, and now a really large community, and we're growing every day. But there wasn't a running group here. There were only 2 official kind of very loosely timed 5K races here that the town put on a year. And I just thought, this is a time to reinvent myself as a runner. If I want to become a better runner and I want community, but I was too intimidated in Fort Collins to even join an established community or shop at a real running store, I can do that here and nobody knows, right? And I'd become a better runner by this time as well. Not fantastic, but better. Had run a couple of full marathons. And so I started run.Windsor as a women's only running group. I started it with a fellow mom who was an accomplished, Boston qualified runner. And we just wanted to create this supportive space for female runners, no matter what stage in life they were at and no matter what their abilities were. And at the time I was training to become a group fitness instructor, and we stumbled upon USCA. We thought, I wonder if there's a program where we could study and become running coaches as well. And so we did a Google search, and we saw a couple of different programs and really enjoyed what we were reading about USCA. And so we both signed up and we took the course and decided we'll create this running group, and we'll offer coaching to this group of women, just to help support them in we give them basic knowledge of running, how to increase your long run. What's the longest you should run for a marathon? How do you pace somebody? And had that group established for a year, maybe, before the town recognized my deep-rooted passion for running now. I think we probably had 30 women in the group, and they offered up one of the 5Ks that they put on a year. It was Parks and Rec, which race directors who are listening know that the work and the manpower and the passion that goes behind putting on an organized running event does not really align with the operations of a Parks and Rec department. You don't see a lot of towns heading up these operations, especially the larger races. It's just, there's a lot of work that requires it can be a full-time job. And so I put on my first 5K. It was probably June of 2018. So maybe about a year after I'd started run.Windsor, and I fell in love. I didn't know what I was doing. I have a marketing background, so I knew how to, rally our community, a little bit of get sponsors. I knew how to advertise and market. I knew runners really well. And I put all those things together, and we pulled off a very successful 5K race, even though I didn't know what I was doing. And that was your word, catalyst. I mean, that really catapulted it up. At the end of the day, my soul was lit up, and I knew this is what I was meant to do. And that's how it got started. And today I put on 7 endurance events in Windsor, Colorado. We're lucky enough to be the only official kind of race organization here. So we don't have a lot of competition when it comes to professionally timed and managed events. And today our races range from 5K up to the ultra marathon distance in Windsor.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, it's quite a journey. And for what it's worth, my wife ran Boston the year after, ran Boston the year after the bombing. And it was, I've been to a bunch of running races, and it was incredible to see how the city came out and supported not just the athletes, the runners, but just the community as a whole. It was pretty incredible. So I can only imagine what it was like to be there, and just with the craziness today, knowing that, Nick was safe, and just sort of just being such a sort of empowering moment to want to to want to get into running, and then obviously eventually starting your own race series. It's an incredible story. It's great.
Well, thank you. And I just pay homage. I mean, it's the running community. It's at every turn there has been information and support along the way. And if you're going to be a part of a community, the running community is the one. It's awesome. I'm so honored to be able to serve and learn every day from those around me in races that we run ourselves, and runners in our community on what they need. And as this industry changes, and as just the world changes too, we have learned that running events can provide so much more to our community and the health of everyone around us beyond just putting on a race. It's really impactful.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things you just said, I thought was interesting, is a race director now, when you go to do other races, to run them yourself, how you must view them in a different light. It's not just, okay, Mandy Mullen going to run XYZ 10K. Like, are you now noticing things like, okay, what's their setup like? How is their course marking? Like, do you kind of almost take it as like education, like each time, and see maybe what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, and things that you could make your events better, or things you might not? I don't know. Do you kind of view them through a different lens now when you're doing your own races?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. When I started running, it was more, 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons, full marathons. And so I used those as learning opportunities after I started run.Windsor, just point blank, Rick, like looking like, how do they do this? Like I never read a book on how to be a race director. And I honestly didn't even do a lot of Google searching. I just thought, looking around me at a race, what do I see? What do I feel? What's the timeline? What do I love about this? And what am I frustrated with? What do I think could be done better? And so that's how I've always been at races. And at the beginning, it was very much learning, because I was, kind of panicked. I'm taking this on as a business. I need to figure out how to do this. Fast forward to today, where I've been putting on, I don't even know how many races I've directed now that we're in 2023, but now I attend them still with eyes open and always learning and soaking it in. But today it's a little bit more of compassion and just gratefulness that someone is doing the hard work to allow me the opportunity to run. And I'm way more forgiving today than I was back then, because I've been through it. And I know that even at my 30th race that I'm directing, I'm still going to have hiccups. There's still going to be problems, and I want grace. And so I just try to give that to race directors now when I attend. And man, I'm just happy to run, because that's where it started, right? Yeah. So I'm around the running community all the time, but when I can take off my race director hat and go be a participant, I'm happy to be there, and I don't have really big, high expectations of the day.
Yeah. It's funny how that works, right? Once you start doing something or you do things that you also do from a professional standpoint. Like I found now as a business owner, which is primarily online. Previously, if I'd go to visit a website and it would be down or slow, I'd start getting upset and throwing stuff. And now I just feel empathy. I'm like, oh man, they must be getting so many hate mails right now. Like, and so it's funny how that changes, right? When you're sort of taking off your race director hat and putting on the participant hat, but you can definitely feel for the event and again, be really thankful for what they're doing.
Yeah. And you kind of want to reach out and be like, hey, is there anything I can do to help you? You're having a hard time, and they look at you like you're weird because you're a paying customer, but it's cool to be able to look at it through that lens.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay. So I want to put on my first event, want to get this thing going, maybe a 5K. What are some of the most important things that I need to know? Again, I'm sure the list is endless, or close to endless, but if there are some sort of key things that I would need to know or focus on, what are some of those things if I want to put on my first running event?
Oh gosh, the key things. I mean, that there are a lot of things. I'm going to try to pick out some key things. So I think knowing your market is important. What's going on in the community that you're wanting to host a race? What's your competition, in the timelines of years? Are there already 3 5Ks happening in May? Probably shouldn't pick May to put on a 5K, depending on the size of your town or your city. Also, just, my biggest struggles in the beginning were understanding and getting to know local regulations. Every municipality is going to be different. And so the timelines that it's going to take in the permitting process, you should figure that out right off the bat. Are you going to you will have to pull a special event permit? How long does that take? Are you going to serve beer or liquor? And how long is that liquor licensing process? A lot of communities have a timeline that doesn't actually match state law because they want their internal staff to have more time to review your application. And same goes for possible start finish lines and where you're going to run. What are those applications like? What are those fees like? I think just getting your time and your general location figured out is the first thing that's important.
Okay.
And the demand. I mean, it all goes hand in hand, right? So once you get all those
Sure.
things figured out, it's all right, can I actually get 200 people here? And what's the budget? Do I need 200 to break even or to make any money? So just kind of basic planning of the possibilities. You definitely want to do that, all of that before you dive into, am I going to offer t-shirts or not? Am I going to have, a band or a DJ? Those are all of the very minute details. So kind of think just big picture.
Got it. So sort of on that same note, and maybe this is a question for when you first started doing your first event, or if you've witnessed any other race directors getting started. Are there any things, like you said, maybe some of those things you just noted are, okay, these are sort of the staples, these are the basics. Is there anything that sort of surprised you, or things that you think race directors might often not think about, which are important, that kind of fall off the radar, whether it be, insurance or EMT showing up, anything like that that people, maybe aspiring race directors, don't necessarily think about?
Yes. Yeah. So the things that have surprised me the most are that runners want a professionally timed event.
Okay.
With bibs and chips and a timer that comes with an official registration platform, like a website or as basic as like active.com, or, I use Run Sign Up. So definitely like what the runner is going to want and need and the costs associated with those, but also the approval process was definitely most surprising to me. So a lot of people, I get so many people all the time, which I'm so excited for the certification because I get so many people that reach out and say, oh, I want to put on a 5K for my church next month. And I'm going to run at this park and on this trail. And I'm like, no, you're not, because you need at least 60 days to be able to even touch a trail or a public park. And so it's the governing agencies and the timelines in line also with, insurance. Like you can't just go out and put on a paid for event without meeting local and state guidelines.
Sure.
So that was really surprising. And mostly maybe it's timelines too, how much time it's going to take for you to plan and implement, whether it's ordering materials, if we're getting metals, a lot of times those are coming from overseas and that can take 2 months and you have to try to predict how many do you need to order. So timelines and the amount of work that goes involved in all of the different categories. I mean, even if it's just a simple 5K, it's still a business. There are still several categories you have to touch on. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I feel like I'm very, I don't know, maybe just like hypersensitive to all the potential details. So like as a result, maybe I just don't do things because I'm like, oh, that's too big of a project. But it's interesting that you said some people are like, hey, Mandy, I'm throwing up, I'm going to do a 5K next month. I'm just going to do this. So do you think a lot of potential race directors underestimate how much is involved, probably more so than overestimate then?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, even people. I mean, I had a girl who now works for me. She's kind of a volunteer, and we started a nonprofit together. She approached me and she said, "I'm going to do what you're doing, but in the town next to you, and I'm not going to make it quite as big as what you're doing, but I want to start this, and and I'm going to host a 5K at this community festival in 6 months." And I said, okay, well, let's talk because at this point we can talk franchise. I can talk about we can team up together. And she came into my office and I'm thinking she kind of knows what it's going to take because she is a runner herself.
Sure.
And I show her, you saw my board in my old office. I show her my big planning board. And right off the bat, she was like, oh, okay, no, so I told her, here are the options. We can talk about franchise. We can talk about you coming on board with my team, or I can, help guide you through what you're wanting to do on your own. And she's like, yeah, no, I'm definitely not doing any of that by myself. So let's go back to you help me with it or redo it under run.Windsor. So I just think it's underestimated. And I think it's awesome for this running community to know more about what race directors are doing for them because it is a lot of work. And the amount of work it is on race day, when you see the production of some of these events, you think there are 10 to 20 person teams behind all of this. And yes, there are probably that many volunteers and more. There aren't 10 to 15 full-time employees putting on these 600 to 1,000 person races.
Yeah.
And like just the other day, we have a professional soccer team coming to Windsor in Hailstorm. And I've been doing a lot of networking with them over the last year since they've been here. So I know them really well. You know, we bring them to fun runs, and we're planning a stadium race there for when their stadium gets finished. But just one of the players the other day, he doesn't know my story, and he sees our races as big, giant events. And there's, you know, my small little team, but a ton of volunteers running around. And so he came up to me and he said, so how did you get hired on to Run Windsor? How long have you been working for them? And I was like, oh, and I get this a lot actually. And I was like, oh, well, it's my company, you know, Run Windsor's mine. And he's like, you own Run Windsor and you do all of the work too? Like, you're at the race. Who owns it? Who does the back end of the business? And I was like, I do that, and I do the advertising, of course, and I, you know, do the legal side, and I, until recently, run my own social media, and I develop the websites. So people on Race Day, when they see the arch and the tents and the vendors and the sponsors, they just don't know that sometimes it could be a 2-person or a 1-person full-time team.
Yeah.
That works year round to make them happen.
Yeah. Well, you know, even like, you know, coming from New York City, even the New York City Marathon, which obviously is huge and they have tons of people, even that, you know, those people, there are year-round people assigned to that, but it's not a big team, you know. So even at one of the biggest marathons in the world, you know, the actual team that's sort of the core team in charge of it, on a year-round basis, it's not. I was kind of blown away by how small it was actually.
Now,
so
how many do they have? Do you know?
It's like, I think the full-time team, it's like 5 or 6. I could be totally wrong, and those are the people that work year-round and everything. And obviously it gets a lot bigger as it gets closer. But yeah, it's, you know, it's still, in the whole scheme of things, not a huge company, you know, organization. So I was shocked about that. I was shocked.
Yeah.
But it's, well, it's funny, you know, you're an example of doing things the right way. I think I mentioned this story to you when I was like a teenager and into cycling. I put on this time trial series, and it was just on these, you know, kind of back roads, and you know, we just did it, and it went off for 2 weeks, no permits, no anything. Everyone just shows up, and then the third week, I show up at the start area, which was in this parking lot. There were like 4 pickup trucks. These guys sitting in the back of the pickup trucks with shotguns and huge dogs. I'm like, okay, that's the end of the race series. We're not doing that anymore. So yeah, so that's an example of how not to do it, apparently. So got to get the permits. Got to get the permits.
Yes, the community has to know.
Yeah. So which leads me to my next question as far as the community. And obviously you're working with your Chamber of Commerce. How important is the community? Obviously you've, you know, almost gone out of your way to really involve the community, be a part of the community. Now you're working with the Chamber of Commerce. But for any race, how important is it to be, you know, to network within your community and be a part of that?
I mean, I think it's so important. And I would love to meet a race director who's like, no, I've just built my own thing and I haven't really made a huge effort to outreach in the community. But also I might have a different perspective, because I'm sure they're going to name us something at some point, but I come from I was a brick and mortar business owner during COVID. And so that right there, like, I'm curious what they're going to call us one day. Like, I don't know, like Gen X, or we're going to get some name, how we grew up as business owners, because we're very gritty and we've been through challenges and we've been told no, and we've had to be really creative and lean on our communities to get through something hard. And so I find it vital. And even without COVID, you know, you need that community support, because you need sponsors. You need people to know about you, about your mission, about your why. You need them to care. You might need them to rally for you if your municipality is giving you a hard time. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. When I started putting on races in Windsor, I have stood in front of town hall several times to fight for my races. You know, there was a time a year ago where, and I love you, Windsor, Colorado, so I'm not bashing anyone, but I was told Windsor is going to limit so that there's only 3 races per year in the community. Per year, not per organization, just per year. So if I have opened registration a year in advance for all 7 of my races, now all of a sudden I have to just pick 3 and then cancel the rest and refund money and then make us all look like we don't know what we're doing. So just that example right there, I needed to be able to call the mayor, who I have a great relationship with, and my contacts at Town Hall and Parks and Rec and say, listen, this isn't okay. And we need to sit down and you need to listen to me. But if I didn't have that relationship, if I didn't show up in the community for other businesses, it would be really hard for me to go to them and say, I need your help, because then I'm just asking, and I'm not showing that actually I'm in this for the community and I have a giving heart. And so that's why I found it really important from that standpoint of just the process. But when it comes to getting runners or getting sponsors, I need to be able to know some of the business owners and decision makers. If I'm going to make a cold call or walk into a business and say, hey, here's a coupon code, can you guys get a team to come run for me? They don't know who I am. They're going to throw it away. They don't care. But if they know that they've seen me celebrating their business, out networking, highly involved, and giving back when they have an ask for their business, absolutely, I'm gonna get that connection, and then the sponsorship piece too. Financially, with races of my size, which I have between 300 up to 800 runners currently per race, I heavily rely on financial sponsors or in-kind sponsors to pay for all of the costs or supplies that I need for race day. And, I like to do that locally, personally, for the most part. We do have, Tailwind as a sponsor and Shields, and we've gotten into some of the bigger names. Hoist is now sponsoring. Who else have we gotten? Bobo Bars is sponsoring. But really, it's my local community that shows up in that. And it's changed my business so much that I would never tell a race director, you could be an introvert in the business world. I think someone on your team or you need to be able to get out there and support local. Yeah.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, then, so even if I put on, one race a year, 2 races a year, I mean, it really is a year round obligation really to be a part of your community, to be able to have those connections. So when you need to kind of get the ball rolling to get your event up and going, whether it be sponsors, permits, whatever, you have those contacts in place. So it really is not a full-time job from that perspective, but it's something you need to be doing all the time.
I think so. I mean, it's a little different. If you're just doing one a year, you're definitely not doing this to make a full-time income, unless you have one really giant race and you're going to walk away with an income that's your full-time pay and you're comfortable with that. But even then, if it's that big of a race, then yes, you, the race director, are working year round because you've got a lot of runners to plan for. But, my only example of this is our community does have a couple of 5Ks that have been going on, and they might not even anymore since COVID. And I'm not even sure if they do because they weren't very big, but I just take the Humane Society puts on one 5K a year here. I don't see them out, that race director out in the community networking, but it's the Humane Society. They've got their own inner network of volunteers and supporters that are going to meet the needs of their race when they're looking to have 100 people there. Mm-hmm. So maybe they can take a more hands-off approach. It's not a for-profit business. They don't have a huge turnout goal. So there are instances where I'd say you're not working on it year-round, but a business model like mine, where you're trying to build a series of races or have a really large race, I think absolutely you're touching on it year round. I don't think there's a time where you're ignoring it.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So going back to if I were going to be putting on my first race, and you also noted that, depending on where you live, the town, municipality, it's all different. What are the steps? Like, how do I know what permits I need? If I'm doing, let's say I want to go out and run on this trail out here, or this road, how do I hire paramedics, EMTs? Do I even need paramedics, EMTs? How do I learn about all that? Or maybe how did you do it? Like you said, you didn't really rely on Google or read a book or anything. How did you kind of figure all that out?
I was lucky because Parks and Rec actually put on the 5K that they gave me, and I didn't buy it from them. They just said, once a year on this date, we order bibs and we do tear tag timing. They didn't even hire professional timers. Okay. Tear tag and put it on a board and write down the time. And we run around the lake plus a little sum because that equals a 5K. And then we give out first, second, and third place medals. We order on Amazon, and we order everyone a t-shirt. and they do registration through rec center. So, I mean, they kind of gave me like their little building blocks, but because of that, I had at least the connection of people that put on a running race around the lake. So from there, I just learned, that's my point of contact, the Parks and Rec manager. So really, I'd recommend just going straight to Parks and Rec, and every town is going to be different. Our Park and Recreation department here handles it. Other towns, it might be town hall or planning. It just is really going to depend on how big your city is, but getting in touch with someone at your town or your city is going to be step one, and just say, I want to put on a race. Where do I start? And most municipalities will have a special event application, and where that gets routed to, again, departments can be different, but you start there. Also, looking at the map and identifying possible locations of your race and understanding what jurisdiction are you in. Are you looking at running on, city-owned trails in a city-owned park? That's very different than running on private land or, through several, not different from, but you might consider how many HOAs are you running through? The HOAs sometimes require approval, even if you're just running on their streets. Another thing would be, how many counties are you running through? We have 2 races here, actually 1 race that runs through 2 counties. We run in Weld County and Larimer County for our full marathon race. And so now I'm dealing with 2 municipalities, counties, 1 town, but 2 counties for the approvals. So I think starting with your town is just always the best way to go, and finding out who owns the trails, who has jurisdiction over the trails and the roads that you're running on. Another thing is, state highway. We have a state highway that we run across for our ultra marathon. And so we have to get Colorado Department of Transportation approval just to cross the street, which you wouldn't think you'd have to, because on a Saturday, there might be, 100 pedestrians crossing that street via bike or running just on a normal day. But the second you turn it into a sanctioned event, you have to get their approval, even if you only have 20 runners on that race.
Right. Yeah, things to think about. For sure. So with things like announcers, music, timing systems, are those also resources that, your local municipality might be able to assist with it? Or is that more of like, okay, hey, let's go to Google search and see what I can find?
Yeah. The municipalities are definitely not going to help you with that. Smaller ones maybe will. For example, we also just took over the Wild West Relay and the Flaming Foliage Relay. So Wild West runs from Fort Collins to Steamboat Springs.
Oh, cool.
Flaming Foliage Relay runs from Idaho Springs to Buena Vista. And we just got off a phone call with someone from the town in Buena Vista, and she was so pleasant, and we're asking her about this one thing, and she says, you know what, I'm going to make this phone call for you and this phone call for you. And it felt very above and beyond. And whether it's a small town or because they really care about these events, that's another thing. Like, you'll find a different level of experience from different communities. So what I've been through might be a different experience for you, but for the most part, finding resources for who to hire and who does what. If you don't already know that and you don't have those connections, that's where I'd rely on your chamber, because chambers typically today most do put on a lot of events, or find another event organizer in the community. Those things for me, I didn't hire out until very recently, because they're extra expenses and they felt extra. Like, I didn't have the budget to cover those yet. And I found my connections, like for my MC, for example, just from my connections of being a race director and a runner. So those connections and relationships will grow the longer you go.
Got it. No, that makes complete sense. So going back to what you're talking about with race sponsors and networking the community. So again, for my little 5K that I'm going to put on, I want to get some race sponsors. What's the first step in that? I mean, as far as how to identify businesses, ones maybe to reach out to. I'm guessing I wouldn't go to my local smoke shop or place like that. Maybe that wouldn't correlate so well with the 5K. But how is there a process to sort of target and then hopefully acquire sponsors?
Yeah, I think you have to first look at your brand. What is your brand and what's going to align with you? Are you the Leadville Marathon and you're looking to connect your runners with brands and products that align with them, and do brands and products and companies align with that type of runner? Or Are you like me, for example, when we first started, it was really wanting to enhance our local community and focus on my small business owners and offer really affordable sponsorships or in-kind sponsorships to support them, but then look to our larger community sponsors to subsidize the cash piece of it. So if it's your brand and what's your mission and what names in your community do you want to be associated with, whether on a local level or a regional level, or when I bring up like Leadville, for example, a national level,
Yeah.
Like Lifetime. So also, take a look around at who's sponsoring other events, who's sponsoring your rec center, who's sponsoring your high school sports. Most likely those sponsors and those companies see value in your type of industry.
Mm-hmm.
If they're sponsoring the local hockey team, they probably are interested in what you're doing because your values and your mission align. And then I would go next to connections. Who do you know? Who do you know that knows you or your team or your reason why? And then finally, new businesses in town that are either, small and maybe want to help you out on a smaller level, or large organizations coming in that need your reputation, need your race to reach out to the community and show that, they're new in town and they want to be a positive part of the community. So a lot of different angles you can take. Again, I'd say go back to your local visitor center or a chamber and talk to them. A lot of times chamber and business leaders in the community, even economic development at your town would be able to tell you, who's here, who wants to give back, who's supportive, who in their mission statement of their organization is not just here for a buck for them and to be a successful company, but also give back to their community. And that's what you're looking for, is people that want to give back, because they know that running does incredible things for our residents and our economic development.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. It's a lot of really good information. Any mistakes that you've made? I mean, obviously mistakes, are just a constant, right? I mean, I make those on a minute-to-minute basis with USK, I feel like. Any sort of ones that stick out though, that like, okay, I am never doing that one again. That was too big, or the fallout was too much. Like, just, okay, these are the absolute no's, learn my lesson, never again.
I have a couple things. So first thing I've learned, and this probably a lot of times comes out of COVID too, is I've stopped putting years on anything. I'll put them on metals sometimes still, just because the color and the design of a metal you probably aren't going to reuse next year. But T-shirts for sure, beanies, any of my swag or my giveaway, I've just stopped putting years on them, because what happened in 2020? So many of us ordered 500 shirts and then our event got canceled and they all said 2020 on them. Now what do you do? I mean, now maybe they're kind of like a novelty. I think we sell them, but right now, if I ordered 500 shirts and I only get 300 registrants, now I have 200 more that have a year on them. And am I going to store them? Am I just going to eat the cost? And so I've found this kind of more recycle, reuse, which I think a lot of race directors are doing, that you have now multiple colors and designs. And so for your next race, you can add that to your inventory. And now, Rick, if you didn't run my marathon this year and you didn't get my blue shirt this year that just has my marathon logo and a cool design on the back, but you run it next year, I give it to you as an option when you go to run or you go to register and you're excited about that blue shirt because you've never seen it before.
Sure.
And so we found kind of this way to do that by avoiding putting years on things that cost us money. Again, and that's me kind of just being frugal with my budgeting. On that same note, I've made a lot of mistakes in avoiding spending on things that will actually add value to my race, and that now I see an ROI on. So some examples there would be hiring an MC. If my MC charges me $200 to $300 to be there for the day, that adds value. It makes me look professional, and I'm not the one, even though I love being the one to do this, but I'm not the one on the microphone all day. Therefore, I can attend to everything else that I'm needed to do. Another thing would be like barricades and, fencing. So my events always have a very, very large kind of beer garden, but the whole race experience is inside, the after experience. So I have my vendor tents and my kids' bouncy house and face painting and retail tent in there. And that's where the beer garden is. Well, I used to set that up by myself with the cheapy orange, construction fencing. But again, I found another race director in town who will let me rent him and his equipment for next to nothing, like $400 a race. And he shows up and he sets it up and it looks professional and I don't have to worry about it. And he takes it down at the end of the day. So I think it was ignoring or not respecting those like extra little costs that actually do add value and make your race a better experience.
Yeah, I think that's a hard thing for small business, just in general, is you don't have this unlimited budget and you're trying to determine, the biggest bang for your buck. And I do think, oftentimes small business owners overlook these things, even though, okay, it'll cost maybe a little bit more upfront, but whether it be from the user experience or just over the longer term, you'll get better ROI. It's definitely a learning experience, but it's hard sometimes to, write that check or whatever it is, right? Because it's, especially with small business and small events and, or smaller events versus like a New York City marathon, I'm sure it's a challenge.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it is. And that's another thing. I mean, if you've got a big t-shirt sponsor that wants to come and they want their logo all over it and they're going to pay for all the t-shirts and they really want it to say the year and they're willing to cover the cost, then, let them do it, let them go for it. But if you're funding it, you just kind of have to weigh those costs out.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So I want to put on my 5K event this same time next year. How far out do I need to start marketing and opening registration?
So that's a tough question. It depends on the size and what you're looking to do and the scope. I recommend at least 6 months to a year. The reason I say 6 months is if you do have a municipality that wants 90 days before for you to turn your permit in before the event, you're going to need to figure out all the other details before that 90-day hits, because once that 90-day hits, that's when your application is in. And at that time, you need to know, where are you having it? What's the course? How many runners are you expecting? Is there beer? Is there not beer? All of those details that you have to figure out. And so that's kind of what I tell people. And I've had a lot of people be, kind of shocked that, sorry, there's a kiddo that has just walked into my office, and let's see if I can get. I've got an employee that has a kiddo at work today. So if we hear a little one, that's fine. So I just think at least exploring it for sure 6 months in advance to know what your timelines are. I definitely don't recommend saying, hey, next month we're going to put on a 5K. Figure out all of the logistics and to advertise and get your sponsors. Just at a bare minimum, if you are wanting shirts, that's a 2-week lead time to get the shirts, and your printer probably needs 2 to 4 weeks to print the shirts. So it's kind of just backing out of the timeline of what you're wanting to do, which in my certification, I kind of go through a lot of those different timelines.
Yeah. And how far out typically do you open registration for an event, or does that completely vary?
Say that one more time.
How far out do you do registration for an event, or do you open registration?
Again, that depends on the length of the event and, knowing that a lot of marathon runners are going to register for a marathon, 6 months to a year out. Now, when I open registration for a marathon event and all the smaller events in there, we do it about a year out. So maybe same day that the race is over, we open for next year, or maybe we wait a month or two. For 5Ks and up, anywhere from 3 to 6 months. I like that 6 month time frame for most of them, though, and that's just been my experience with my community. I've always cautioned you when I talk to you about my race directing experience. I never, read the handbook or Googled. I've kind of just figured things out that work for me, and I think that's what. You've created your own path with your own business too. And I think it's important to understand what's happening in your market and learn from your own experiences there.
Gotcha. Are there any specific technology that you would recommend as far as event registration, website builders, anything like that?
Yes, my first race, I want to say, I think I told you we went through Parks and Rec because they said we have registration. And so a lot of race directors who are listening right now, or potential ones, your rec department might be really excited that you want to do this because it's something they're not offering perhaps. And they might say, yes, do it. We'll support it. We'll help you pull permits and we'll open registration through our platform, because that's also, what they're doing. They're registering families for events year round. That was not a good experience for me, because the way that registration and payment happens and data collection from a Parks and Rec software doesn't always easily transform into what you need as a race director. You need your hands-on information all the time to know how many runners do you have, what sizes of t-shirts are being ordered, all the way to timing. And your timer is going to need all that information in the CSV file, at least a couple days before. And a lot of considerations to make there on if you're prepping bibs before, if you're doing day of bib assignment. So I went from those days of relying on someone else to help me with registration to where I would highly not advise that. Today I use Run Sign Up, and I've used them almost since probably my second race, I would say. And I love Run Sign Up. It does literally everything I need it to do. And I know there are a couple of others out there. My experience though is finding something that's a one-stop shop. So a platform just like Run Sign Up that you can actually create your race website through their platform. They have support that'll help you build it and go through Q&A, answer all of the questions and help you, make decisions as you build it. And it's also like the back-end registration platform. So you're building your entire site, registration, all the way through linking your timer and being able to post results and photos on Run Sign Up. And so you're not using any other software other than that. Other than your timer will use something different for time, but Run Sign Up also integrates with your timer. So I think just do your research. The great thing about most of these platforms today is they're not going to charge the race director. So it's pretty much free because they're going to make their money off of registration fees that you can opt to pass on to runners, which we're all used to paying registration fees for races.
Sure. So with things like liability waivers, insurance waivers, are those typically included with, say, like Run Sign Up? Like you can maybe modify it, but it's sort of a click-through page that athletes need to go just sort of, okay, I agree to the terms, next.
Yeah, Run Sign Up and other platforms, they're going to have a pre-formatted one in there. You can edit it. So if you're a municipality or landowner of where you're running or insurance requires specific verbiage, you can go in and edit those waivers, but it's a one-stop shop there too.
Okay. Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. I know you said you give away, you do t-shirts, all that kind of stuff. Any swag that you found that runners like the most, whether it be, I don't know, hats, t-shirts, so on and so forth?
I think I've experienced that they want something a little different. If you're going to do a shirt, it needs to be a very high quality shirt that they enjoy running in and wearing around town. I personally would never, ever order just a normal cotton shirt again as my giveaway. Just your old big cotton t-shirts. I mean, those, I don't know how many of those we all own, but it's way too many. So my crew has found, or my followers have really enjoyed us just changing it up, but maybe keeping something on brand per race. And so for Lucky Brew example, my St. Patty's Day race every year, those are socks that are branded for Lucky Brew. And so if you run my Lucky Brew, you're getting a new design of socks every single year. And they really look forward to that. And that's kind of something that is just part of my brand now, to expect that. But we do hats, beanies, sunglasses. We do shirts for a couple of our larger events as well, because I think that's important. If you ran the Windsor Marathon, you want to walk around with that t-shirt on. So
sure.
Just kind of pick and choose, but the sky's the limit. There are a lot of fun things you can do these days. Buffs are a fun one. I did a polar bear plunge in Fort Collins, and she did custom towels.
Oh, that's fun.
You could use it after the plunge. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. So last question for you, and maybe this sort of encapsulates everything we've been speaking of. What tips would you give someone who wants to become a race director? Anything that sort of stands out that maybe, again, even if I did buy a book on how to be a race director or Google that, maybe I wouldn't necessarily find. I always feel like there's sort of insider tips are sometimes the most valuable. It's like you can always find those 10 common things on any web page, but what are some things I might not be able to find on a web page or in a race director book that you would really strongly recommend from a current race director?
I would recommend that you understand and you honor the amount of time that goes into this, because like I said before, it's really underestimated how much work it is and how much planning goes into that process. And so it's acknowledging within yourself and your family, do you have that capacity? Are you willing to put in that time, and are you planning far enough in advance to do that? At the same time, finding a team to help you, whether it's just volunteers at first or, someone else that can help you along the way. But I'll caution too, I wouldn't recommend hopping into a partnership right away on the official business side of things until you both understand the full time commitment and that you have missions and goals that are aligned. That's a mistake that a lot of business owners make all the time. It's like,
Sure.
yeah, this sounds like fun. Let's just hop in and do it together. But until you really understand the beast and what you both want out of it and what you're both willing to give, don't go into any legal paperwork. Take your time on that end. I think the other thing too is I personally at a race, I can tell when I'm at a race and the race director or at least the team loves running and is passionate and is inspiring me. And I can tell they want to be there versus showing up and I feel like it's a business transaction. And I feel like this person that's leading this event could have just said, I want to put on events to make money. Which one should I choose? I'll just choose a running event. I wouldn't recommend doing that because it's not always a moneymaker and it's a lot of work, and your passion or lack thereof, it's going to show on race day because you're not well rested. You're awake all week long. You're out marking the course. Again, in these early stages when you're doing most of the work, I still do. I'm out at packet pickup, cleaning up packet pickup. I'm the one going home with the bibs at 9 p.m. and getting stuff prepped for the next day until 10 or 11, whatever that might be. And then I'm up on the course at 4 a.m., 5 a.m., executing, whether it's marking the course or managing the start of the setup line. So it's a lot of work and you're really tired and you have to have the passion and the love for it behind all of that to fuel you so that you're not a broken mess at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I don't want to scare anyone either too, because that part has gotten a lot easier. I do get a lot more sleep now that I have, a full-time employee and a lot of volunteers who know what they're doing because they've been with me for so long. And then a lot of paid independent contractors that help me with very specific tasks on race day.
Okay. Got it. Yeah, that's a lot. It's a lot of stuff for sure. There's no getting around that. So I lied. I have one more question for you. So how important is being able to think on your feet and being able to pivot sort of on a second's notice? I'm guessing whether it be weather or potentially course changes. Like I remember I did a race one time and they tarred and chipped the roads the day before and therefore they had to find an alternate route, right? And that was less than 24 hours notice, I think. So how important is that skill and being able to kind of pivot and adjust on the fly?
Oh, it's important. So you have to be thinking of all the possible scenarios, whether it's weather or last minute changes to the course. Mostly weather's been the biggest thing that I've run into, but we live in Colorado. So having an alternate course for something is always a good idea. Just knowing what will you do if something happens along the center of the course? If you're crossing a major highway, for example, or a really busy road, what are you going to do if that morning there's a major accident and they close it down? How are you going to reroute? And maybe you don't have to plan out to the T, but what's your contingency plan if now you can't cross Main Street and now instead you have to go a different route, or how far down can you go until you cross again? Weather's always been an important part when you're talking about being around, water. So, or areas of low drainage, paying attention and asking your town, are there ever concerns running around this reservoir? We put on a race that didn't have great drainage and we had a big blizzard and it was all covered. It wasn't a blizzard. It was a rainstorm and not great drainage. And the town knew it wasn't great drainage, but the day before the race, it's, feet deep of water. And I know I have a lot of strollers coming through and we had I think we ended up changing the weekend because the weather was just so bad. We ended up postponing that race altogether. But having that contingency plan, having contacts that can help you with the course if you do have a change in plans. And this is especially important for the longer distances. And being able to walk away from what you're doing to handle those emergencies is important. And that's why I say like you probably shouldn't be the MC on race day, because if you get a phone call like I did from Xcel Energy and they say there are downed power lines crossing over the entire 3 miles of path you're running through this one section in the town next over, you have to come pick your runners up. You have to be able to figure that out. You can no longer announce runners at the finish line. You also have to have someone else that can stay at the finish line and be in charge there, because, you know, for me, I had a liquor license. So you have to be able to think on your feet, and you have to be available on race day and the day before to make those last minute pivots. And just knowing who you're going to call. I mean, so for me, it was having phone numbers in my phone of fire department and, you know, police in both towns that I was operating in, to call and open a map and say, this is where I want to reroute my runners. Are you okay with it? Can you assist me with these additional road crossings? Great. Now I'm going to send all these volunteers out there. But I mean, and I wasn't prepared for that. I had no idea. There was a mini tornado the night before, and I couldn't have expected that. But I had my emergency contact list and I had a map. And so, you know, just critical things to where if something happens, you can at least handle it.
Yeah. Well, that's such important information. I mean, I don't think I would necessarily think to have, you know, the emergency information for, you know, for all the different towns or townships I'm going through. So yeah, that's awesome. That's great information.
Yeah. And the relationships with those people, right? Like when I called our chief, it wasn't the first time I've ever met him. I actually had a meeting in his office, and I showed him my course map and said, you know, just so you know, this is the map of this ultra marathon. And so if you get a call and we say we have someone that has passed out at aid station 9, here's where it's at. And just to equip them with that information too, because if there's an emergency and they get a 911 call and they say, well, I'm at the marathon and I'm at aid station 3. If you didn't have that meeting and you didn't share that, or your town or city didn't make you review that with them, they don't know where they're going. You're out in the middle of a trail, or, you know. Yeah. So yeah, no, I'm sure they're so grateful for that information. Yeah. And I think a lot of times it's a requirement, but if it's not and you live somewhere small, I'd still go in, because guess what? If you're just putting on a 5K and you have that meeting, when you decide to do a marathon one day, you've established that relationship. You've shown that you're responsible, and they know who you are, and they know that you take your job seriously. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's great. It's a great point. Well, thank you so much for your time on this, Mandy. This is great. I think it's such great information. I know obviously we went into a lot of this and more with the certificate course, but yeah, this is awesome. So thank you so much for providing this. I know it provides a ton of value for those that are looking to either, you know, maybe enhance the races that they're currently directing, or if they're thinking about putting one on. So, well, thank you, Rick. It's always so fun to talk to you. And again, just always want to thank you, ESCA, because I wouldn't be here without stumbling upon your certification. So yeah, well, it's a pleasure. Well, thank you so much. No, I appreciate the kind words, and we'll look forward to having another one of these conversations again, whether it be on maybe as you put on your 50th race and continue to grow Run Windsor. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. You got it. Thank you, Mandy.